hear this question a lot. When the love of my life leaves me, what in the world should I do? How can I live through this horrific thing? And it could be a divorce in a marriage that's lasted many years. It could be an engagement that's broken off, or it could be a deep relationship where I thought I had this person for the rest of my life to love and for them to love me. And suddenly they decide to leave, and that relationship is over. Well, today I want to share with you 3 simple points that are really profound if you put them all together. And the 3 points spell out GPS. And what's my roadmap to get to where I want to be when the love of my life walks out the door and apparently they're not coming back? That's devastating, isn't it? And I want to share these 3 points with you. First of all, permission to grieve. Oftentimes when we experience a non-death tragedy in my life, where it hasn't been that somebody died, but it's been that a relationship died, oftentimes we don't consider that as loss, but it is loss, isn't it? And so grieving will be part of the process when somebody walks out the door, never to return again. What in the world do I do? Well, the first thing I want to share with you is to give yourself permission to grieve, because this situation is a loss. It's a huge loss. Definition of grief comes to play here. And I want you to think about this, that when you experience loss, and in this case, it's the love of your life that walks out the door and they leave you, that grieving is a natural and normal response to loss of any kind. That's a very basic definition of grief. And it really does help to reframe what has happened to me as a loss situation, because then grief is permitted. And see, there's another definition of grief that helps here. There's the Grief Recovery Institute, and this book that they have written, that John James and Russell Friedman wrote, they have in there something that's very important about a definition of grief. Grief is conflicting feelings, they write, that is caused by the end of or a change in a familiar pattern of behavior. That's what grief is. So here you have this person. You could have been married to them, engaged to them. You could have had a relationship with them that is so deep and meaningful to you, and you thought it was going to last forever. And then they walk out and they leave you. Maybe they leave you for somebody else or something else, but the message comes that maybe you're not good enough. And here's what we found with those who have experienced this, that oftentimes they lose their confidence. They say, what did I do wrong? What is it that I did that caused them to leave? And all the blame goes on yourself. And then if they do leave, you get very angry because they promised to be with you forever. You might have been married 25 years and your husband or wife decides to leave you. And so you talk about a self-confidence shattering experience. That's what that is. And so oftentimes those that have experienced this, and you could be one of those, and many of us have experienced similar things, but you could be one of those. You might say, what is wrong with me? And then you have conflicting feelings of anger at the person who did it, and then self-pity on yourself because you think, I must have done something wrong. I'm not good enough for them. So our first point is to give yourself permission to be in a grieving situation because you have experienced deep loss. Those conflicting feelings come, and then life is never going to be the same again. Life that you once had is now over. That's a huge loss. Permission to grieve. And almost in the same breath, this leads us to our second point today, permission to recover. And another organization I work with called Marriage Helper, and if you need help on your marriage, Marriage Helper is a great resource for you to use, and it's marriagehelper.com, and you can go there. The founder of Marriage Helper, Joe Beam, came up with this acrostic as far as what can people do when they undergo a change in a relationship and they're trying to get their spouse back, or maybe their spouse is gone forever. What can you do? And he comes up with a very simple thing called pies, that you need to work on yourself physically, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. Pies, work on your pies. In our grief work at Spark of Life, when we deal with people who have life issues, And one of our mottos for 2021 is take back your life. And in this world of COVID, in this world that everything's been changing, I think we need an attitude of, I'm going to take back my life. I'm going to be safe and I'm going to be smart, right? But I will take back my life. I can have life again. And when somebody leaves me that is the love of my life, I feel helpless. So what can you do? Well, here's what we say at Spark of Life. We say, all you can do is all you can do, and all you can do is enough. And you know what that says? That says you can only do what you can do. Isn't that brilliant? You can only do what you can do. I can't do what I cannot do. Now, you mark that down. Write it down, memorize it. It is profound. I cannot work on somebody else's pies. I can't control the person who walked out on me. I can't and shouldn't try to manipulate them. I can't do for them what they must do for themselves. I am powerless to change them. So what do? I work on what I can work on. I work on this fellow right here. I work on me. I work on me physically. That means get up and wash my face sometimes after I have a good cry, after I grieve, and I'll continually grieve for a while, right? But in the very midst of me giving myself permission to grieve, I give myself permission to recover, to get up, wash my face, as it were, and get back to living. Do I do that acting as if I haven't been hurt? No. You give yourself permission to grieve. That's the G. The P is do what you can do, work on your pies. And the third thing you do is have singular focus. Gary Keller has written an incredible book, I think. It's called The One Thing. The One Thing, basically, he says, nobody can really multitask in 100% efficiency in multiple tasks at the same time. It's just impossible. But if I focus on one thing, I can get so much done if I just start with the one thing I need to do today, and then the energy created by that will end up having an incredible productive day. The people we work with that are overcome with grief and loss and life situations, such as when the dearest on earth to me, the loved one I have, the one I love the most, walks out the door and leaves me for whatever reason, I need energy. I need to have some kind of plan. How do I cope with that? So we've talking about grieving. We're talking about permission to work on yourself, your pies. And then we're talking about the S of the GPS, and that's singular focus. And what Gary Keller does in this book is phenomenal because he uses the domino principle. I have another video about this. It's called Domino Day. You need to look at that video. But it's amazing because what it does is when we deal with people so overcome with life, they feel overwhelmed. Do you feel overwhelmed right now? I'll almost guarantee you do. You've probably sought help in other videos and other books and things like that. And there's so much good information, but I get overwhelmed. So I got to break it down. What's the next thing I need to do? The most important thing I need to do, break it down to one thing. The domino effect is when you start with a 2-inch domino, and if you line up dominoes, and every domino after that 2-inch is 1.5 times the size of the previous domino, second domino would be 1.5 times 2, it'd be 3 inches tall. The third domino would be 4 inches tall, 4.5 inches tall, and then it gets too complicated for this brain to understand, and your brain probably, right? But if you line up all these dominoes, and each one is 1.5 times bigger than the first one, and the second one, and so on. And the dominoes go from this size, and it just keeps progressing upward. If you go to the 18th domino with this progression, 1.5 times the size of the previous, the 18th domino would be as large from the earth to the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It would be that tall. Have you ever seen the Leaning Tower of Pisa? Let me give you some heads up. It's leaning. I saw it. And then the 23rd domino would be as tall as the Eiffel Tower in Paris. The 23rd domino. The 31st domino would be 3,000 feet taller than Mount Everest. The 57th domino would be as big as from the earth to the moon. That's how big the 57th domino would be if you started with a 2-inch domino, and every domino is 1.5 times the size of its predecessor, as it were. And all these engineer type people, the ones whose names end in ist, like physicists or whatever, they figured this out, that a domino can knock over another domino 1.5 times its size. So if you want to get to the moon, if you want to recover, if you want to make progress in living when your heart's been ripped out by somebody and they've left you, maybe with kids, they've left you with bills, they've left you and they've crushed your spirit. If you want to progress out of that pit, you start with a 2-inch domino. If you started with the 57th domino, that's as big as from here to the moon, and you tried to knock over that domino, you would have a broken shoulder. If you ran full speed into it, you can't budge it. If you tried to hit the 31st domino, if you tried to knock that over, you wouldn't do it. What about the 27th? What about the 23rd? What about the 18th? If you knocked over the 10th domino, it would be as tall as Peyton Manning. He's like 6'4" or 5. I doubt if I could knock that over. Oh, maybe I could, but it would hurt, right? You don't start with the 10th domino. What do? You start with the 2-inch domino. If you want to get to the moon in your recovery, no matter what life has thrown at you, you can take back your life by starting with the 2-inch domino. Knock that sucker over. Whack away at it. Do the next right thing. That's the 2-inch domino. The next right thing might mean to grieve. It might mean to cry. You're not weak if you cry. Loss in life brings on grief. But you need to recover. So get up and wash your face. Work on your pies. And then do all of this, doing it one thing at a time, and you won't feel so overwhelmed. And what Keller says in his book is absolutely true. That will result, when you do the next right thing in your recovery, it will result in tremendous energy being generated. Synergy, they call it. Big old word, right? Synergy. It won't be linear. It'll be geometric. It'll be powerful. Do the next right thing. The next thing might be to go to sparkoflife.org. We have great resources for people who've been battered by life and by what other people have done to them, or what fate has done, or whatever you call it. When you experience loss and life takes a hit and you feel like quitting, when give up lurks, do the next right thing. Go to sparkoflife.org. Subscribe to our YouTube channel here. Like this video. Look at it. Share it with some friends on Facebook, on social media. But do the next right thing, because at Spark of Life, there's always, always hope.